The philosophical splendor and otherworldly music of India had a profound impact on the Beatles as musicians and as people. The allure of the subcontinent enchanted the lads from Liverpool for years, and in turn helped bring Indian music and spiritualism to the West. Today, we're going to show you 10 very interesting facts about the Beatles in India. Let's begin. Transcendental meditation, the purpose of the band's trip to Rishikesh, India, was introduced to the Beatles by George Harrison's first wife, Pattie Boyd. Pattie, who was interested in exploring spirituality, had seen advertisements for meditation classes in a newspaper and told George about them. George told the rest of the band about the classes, and they eventually attended one of the Maharishi's lectures, leaving them even more curious about meditation. This led to the band embarking on a 10-day conference of the spiritual regeneration movement, where they renounced drugs. Paul says, "It was an experience we went through. Now it's over and we don't need it anymore." After their stay was cut short due to the death of manager Brian Epstein, the Maharishi invited the Beatles to Rishikesh to learn more about transcendental meditation at his ashram. So, big thanks to Pattie for this spiritual introduction. George and John were the most hooked on meditation out of all the Beatles. They both had very intense and emotional experiences while at the ashram, and their accounts of these experiences are fascinating. John says, "I was in a room for 5 days meditating. I wrote hundreds of songs. I couldn't sleep and I was hallucinating like crazy, having dreams where you could smell. I do a few hours and then you trip off, 3 or 4 hour stretches. It was just a way of getting there, and you could go on amazing trips." George also had a very extreme experience and says, "The meditation buzz is incredible. I get higher than I ever did with drugs. It's simple, and it's my way of connecting with God." Paul even says that when he brought up discussing music and upcoming albums, George would remind him that they were there to meditate, not to talk music. Ringo left Rishikesh with his wife, Maureen, after only 10 days. Ringo had a tough time adjusting to life at the ashram, and his lack of enthusiasm towards meditation made it easy for him to leave. For starters, he knew food was going to be a problem because of his allergies. He even brought an entire suitcase of Heinz beans. Ringo was also particularly bothered about the accommodations, saying, "You'd have to fight off the scorpions and tarantulas in a bath. Then you'd get out of the bath, get dry, and get out of the room because all the insects came back in." The Beatles were pitched a Lord of the Rings movie deal while in Rishikesh. The head of Apple Films, Dennis O'Dell, came to India to discuss the possibility for this being their next film project. There was even a list of potential directors being thrown around, including Stanley Kubrick, Michelangelo Antonioni, and David Lean. It was roughly decided that if the movie were to be made, John would play Gollum, Paul would play Frodo, George would play Gandalf, and Ringo Starr would play Sam. The Beatles weren't alone on their visit to the ashram. Of the many guests that joined the Beatles on their visit, Donovan, the Beach Boys' Mike Love, and actress Mia Farrow are some of the most notable. Their guests were, therefore, present during the band's songwriting processes. Mike Love recalls an especially exciting experience, saying, "I was sitting there one day when Paul came to the table with his acoustic guitar, saying, 'Hey, listen to this, Mike. Flew in from Miami Beach, BOAC, didn't get to bed last night.' He was writing back in the USSR. I told him, 'You should sing about all the girls around the Soviet Union, the Ukraine girls, the Moscow girls. Georgia on my mind.'" Donovan, a popular Scottish singer, taught the band a string-picking technique that was incorporated onto many of the White Album's greatest songs. In his biography, Donovan explains the process of teaching John, saying, "My new pupil went to it with a will, and he learned the arcane knowledge in 2 days. In this way, John began to write in a whole new way, composing Dear Prudence and Julia in no time flat." He also talks about his experience with George, saying, "What George was fascinated with was these descending chord patterns that I was playing, and out of it came the most heart-rending song I've ever heard him write, but also that anybody had written, While My Guitar Gently Weeps." Relationships were heavily strained while in India. First, John and Cynthia. Their relationship had already been in a decline because of John's affair with Yoko Ono, but Cynthia hoped that India would rekindle her bond with John. However, this was not the case, and Cynthia recounts how cold John was towards her on the trip, saying, "He would get up early and leave our room. He spoke to me very little, and after a week or two he announced that he wanted to move into a separate room to give himself more space. From then on, he virtually ignored me. both in private and in public. This was not the only relationship that had taken a toll while in India. Paul and his longtime girlfriend Jane Asher also experienced problems, and they broke up soon after returning home. The ashram was abandoned in the 70s and its buildings were collapsing, but it is now a tourist attraction. After the Maharishi stopped using the ashram, the government reclaimed the land. However, this did not stop Beatles fans from trespassing and graffitiing the walls with tributes. In 2015, the ashram was opened to the public and became an official tourist spot, welcoming visitors from all over the world. The ashram is where the White Album was created. Often regarded as the greatest album of all time, if you're me, was conceived while at the ashram in India. The Beatles were incredibly productive while in India in terms of songwriting and drew on their surroundings, guests, and experiences for song inspiration. Thanks to this new environment, the band explored new subjects in their music, and their sound underwent a massive change in comparison with their previous psychedelic album, Sgt. Pepper. Their trip to India helped bring Eastern culture and music to the West. The Beatles were experiencing a huge wave of success at the time of their trip to Rishikesh. After having released the Sgt. Pepper album less than a year prior, they had become the spokesman of their generation, and all eyes were on them for guidance. Their personal fascination with meditation and spirituality resonated with a generation that was looking for love, not war. Given their immense popularity and influence at the time, many have claimed that the Beatles are largely responsible for popularizing meditation in the West, which would deeply impact the counterculture movement. That's all for today, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the video, and please leave in the comments below any facts about the Beatles in India you know. Thanks so much for watching, and special thanks to contributing author Leah Robbins. Be sure to check out some of our other videos on music, such as Why Did Freddie Mercury Write Bohemian Rhapsody?, The Story Behind Toto's Africa, and if you're a Beatles fan, well, let's just say this is your channel. Thanks to the amazing patrons who keep this channel alive, and if you're into super underground music, then definitely check out the HollyHobs on Spotify, Apple Music, and everywhere music is streamed. If you want to be notified when new videos are out, at this point you'll have to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and pray that YouTube will recommend anything you actually might want to see. If you have an idea for a video, please be sure to leave a comment. See you next time.